Have you ever fallen in love with someone on the radio? You didn't know this person even existed a few minutes ago, but their sad story touches you deeply and you just know they're destined to be with you, or you're destined to be with them. Well, I hope you haven't done that, because that's insane. But then again, a lot of romantic comedies are insane, even some of the very popular ones, like the one we're about to talk about today. You know what's a pretty sane choice, though? Switching what's in your mug to the fairly traded premium Arabica beans offered by Sparkplug Coffee. They're the freshest beans in the vast expanse of Canada, which as we record this is on fire, and they'll be delivered to people in the Great White North for free within 1 week. Let's hope to God by the time this gets posted, that's not true anymore about the fires. Americans will also get their shipments in a week or less, but international trade has its snafus, so there will be no free shipping for you Yanks. The cost is reasonable, though. But people from either country can pick from a wide assortment of blends and roasts, including quite a few options when it comes to seasonal blends. And this is probably standard in the coffee trade by now, but they offer half-calf and decaf too. You don't need to be a member of any club to find your way up on top of the Empire State Building, but being a member of Sparkplug's Autopilot Coffee Club is even better than that great view of New York City, and we've been there. We can tell you it's a great view. You'll get perks and deals, and you'll even save money on every single order, which somebody who comes and goes when they feel like it can't enjoy. And as a member, you can customize to get your orders when it suits you. This is certainly not some jive-ass Coffee of the Month club. Okay, ready your fingers to enter this into your browser, sparkplug.coffee/HYES. You'll save 20% on your next order by using our HYES promo code. Okay, we're only a few hours away from the first day of summer, so let's all put smiles on our faces about that, even though, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, we won't be smiling about the movie we're about to discuss. Maybe we will, at its expense.
Spoiler alert for something that's going to happen in seconds.
At its expense, we'll be smiling because we didn't like it. Andrew Luther, please hit the play button on your theme song.
And action! Have you ever seen
Sleepless in Seattle? Hello and welcome to our podcast, movie enthusiasts, and thanks for checking out our 519th Chatterfest. Once a week and every other Friday, we here at Have You Ever Seen choose a film from the past in review and spoil the ever-loving out of it. I'm the grown man who would never let a sassy 8-year-old run his love life, Ryan Ellis. And here's the star of my love life, the lady who disliked this movie about as much as I did, my wife Bev.
That's me. We are compatible in this way.
Yep. And no 8-year-old to run my love life. Sam is way older than 8 years old, and he's a dog. The coming attractions... I should, by the way, say that. I said it on Scarface last Friday. This is the first time you and I are recording, though, without Tilly. So, a little tribute to our dog, Tilly. We had to put her down.
R.I.P. Our very old girl who was very well loved. We are going to miss her. It was no tragedy, but yeah, we had to say goodbye to our Tilly.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we love Tilly. We miss her. But for those who didn't hear before, she's gone. We'll have a foster soon, and she'll get replaced. Tilly will get replaced.
She'll never be replaced. We'll definitely have other dogs in this house very soon.
We are foster parents, if we didn't. I think we've said that before. Okay, the coming attractions trivia for Sleepless in Seattle. Nora Ephron's movie refers to the Cary Grant-Deborah Kerr love drama, an affair to remember many, many times. Both films are on the AFI's Top 100 Passions list. Simple question. Which one ranks higher?
I don't think this will surprise anybody. It's a fairly easy question. A Fair to Remember is much higher. I was surprised. See, it is number 5. Sleepless in Seattle is 45.
Yep, that's right. Easy thing to find. I think it's the only one on the entire list, by the way, of romantic movies that was directed by a woman.
Get out. Seriously?
Well, most of the movies are old, right? So you're not going to have, almost ever, except Ida Lupino back in the 40s, direct a movie of any kind, let alone a romantic movie.
No Petty Marshall or...
Big might have been worthy, for example, despite the weirdness of that romance, but it wasn't on there.
Yeah, I can see that not being a Passions, but wow.
I was surprised to learn that. That would be a better question. True or false? Is she the only one that directed a movie? And I don't know for sure. I glanced at it. I think I'm right about that. Seems ironic, isn't it? Okay, Love at First Listen was released just a few days shy of 30 years ago by TriStar Pictures on June 25th, 1993. It cost about $21 million to make and somehow went on to gross 10 times that amount worldwide. But Bev, the movie is 30 years old very soon, so please remind us what it's about and give us a skinny on Sleepless in Seattle.
On Christmas Eve, Meg Ryan's Annie catches a radio call-in show that features a little boy, Jonah, lamenting that his father is taking too long to replace his mom who died. When Jonah's father, Tom Hanks' Sam, comes on the line to describe what made his late wife so special, Annie, a woman who is engaged to a perfectly lovely man whose reddest flag is that he has allergies, is suddenly compelled to blow up her entire life to pursue him. Annie tries everything to get Sam's attention. She sends him one letter. She pays a private detective to secretly photograph him. She flies across the country to gape at him from across the street, but nothing works. It's almost like this romance is doomed. That is, until Jonah, a child clearly demented by grief and possibly a latent personality disorder, flies to New York on his own to meet Annie on top of the Empire State Building. Sam follows him, and right at the last minute, Annie and Sam finally meet, and I guess fall in love because they hold hands, and a song plays, and the credits roll.
They were thunderstruck. That was very good work, by the way. One of your best skinnies in a while.
I'm always at my best when I'm at my pettiest.
Yeah. This movie deserves it. Or, in a nutshell, this isn't a nutshell, but I just thought about when you're reading that, so I'm going to steal your thing you do about Love Actually. I am sorry because Mum died, but I'm most sorry because I don't have a new mum. And I'm not in love.
The movie betrays it even because his dad gets a new girlfriend who is as perfectly fine as Walter is.
She has a weird laugh.
Oh, her laugh is not pleasing to his ears. He is right to pursue another woman.
Yep.
As a person with an annoying laugh, I take it personally.
Loud, not annoying. Okay,
Thank you, dear. Not annoying to you, because otherwise, obviously, we could never have gotten married.
I do have an actual nutshell. You don't cry and moan about a dead loved one when people are around. You get rip-roaring drunk and you weep when you're all alone. That's how I do it.
There's no crying.
There's no crying in love-making or love-finding.
What, your wife's already been dead for a year and a half? You're still sad about it?
Or, nutshell, we popped a rom-com in the DVD player and a horror movie broke out.
If you changed just the score, this would be a horror film.
They made The Shining into a love story, what do you want to call it, a father and a son kind of thing?
The trailer, there's a fake trailer for The Shining.
One of the greatest things in the history of the internet.
It's like famously went viral a long time ago. When going viral was still something that was fresh and new. If you've never seen it, do yourself a favor and look up The Shining fake trailer. This is why there is the internet.
Back to the Future broke Back to the Future, so it turned Marty and Doc into a gay love affair. Mrs. Doubtfire was turned into a horror movie type of thing.
Also,
they could do the same thing with this. And the same year as that movie came out is when this movie came out. So another nutshell is obsessed fiancé stalks lonely widower across the country. And I think maybe he's going to die when they leave that Empire State Building. She got what she wanted. Time to kill him.
Walter dodged a bullet.
Okay, the bona fides in this movie. 75% of Rotten Tomatoes critics like it. 6.6 out of 10 is the average. There are 60 reviews on the site and 75% of audiences. It was fifth at the 1993 U.S. box office. Jurassic Park was number 1. Schindler's List was number 9. And Groundhog Day was number 13. We've covered all of those, and they're all way better than this thing. This movie was nominated for 2 Oscars. Nora Ephron's original screenplay, wow. And the original song, A Wink and a Smile by Mark Shaman and Ramsey MacLean. The song, okay. The screenplay, man. As we already discussed, it was 45th on the Top 100 Passions. Casablanca was number 1, and it was 10th in the rom-com category of the Top 100 genres. And there are even more AFI recognitions by being nominated. There's a lot of them, actually. So it was nominated for the Top 100 Laughs. Did we laugh even 3 times? It was nominated for the Top 100 Cheers. Most inspiring. Go find that man and stalk him until he loves you.
Leave your perfectly good partners.
That just proposed to you, whatever it was, a few weeks ago or months ago. And it was nominated for the 2 songs, A Wink and a Smile, and also When I Fall in Love. And the 1998 and 2007 Top 100 lists. So it was possible we could have covered it years ago when we were doing the greatest movies of all time. And we had issues with some of those movies, including Swing Time. This is probably a little better than that, but not by that much.
Swing Time is the first movie where I really let my catty side out when we were covering it because it was mind-numbingly
This
stupid.
has the same ending where the fiancé says, you don't want to marry me? That's cool. Go be with that guy.
Go get him, girl.
Walter does that here.
What the hell is wrong with you people? We'll get into it when we get into it.
Let's hear your thoughts right now.
Okay, well, I apologize in advance to fans of this film. It's not completely without its charms, but I am totally in the dark on how it ever became such a hit and such a cultural juggernaut. 2 charming lead actors, 2 of the greatest leading actors, especially of the 90s.
And good together. They made 3 movies together in less than 10 years.
Yeah.
Never again since. I wish they had.
Everybody forgets the first one, which was Joe versus the
Lot of
volcano. Okay, it has a
love that one.
cult following, and in my opinion, it's the best movie they made together.
No, I think the third one is.
You think You Got Mail?
Better than this.
But you think it's better than Joe versus
I only
Volcano?
saw the movie once.
Maybe you need to see it again.
Okay.
And you need to see You Got Mail again, which is pretty bad.
I saw it within the last few years, and I hadn't seen Sleepless in Seattle since I don't know when. But there are enough things in that I like.
It's...
That's funnier than this is, for one thing.
Oh, it definitely is. This movie is not funny. I don't root for the romance. The kid, everything he does makes no sense. It is cruel to Walter and Victoria. And maybe this is just part of me being 45. Maybe, although the first time I saw this movie, I remember finding their breakup scene in the restaurant before she takes off to the Empire State Building. And the way Walter takes it, without being remotely upset, he has a smile on his face. And he's like, hey, man, if I'm not your soulmate, go get him. You proposed to this woman. How is this not breaking your heart?
And it's not like he knows she was doing all this either.
No.
Okay, she doesn't want to be with me. He doesn't know any of this until that moment.
And you could set something up in the script to imply that he's also having cold feet. He's also having second thoughts about why they got together. Oh, they've been together since high school, and actually over the years they've grown apart, and maybe they don't belong together now, and he's having the same thoughts. And then that could be a way to make it make sense that she is suddenly pursuing someone else. But they do not remotely make the case for Walter being wrong for her. And then Victoria's only fault is that she's trying a little too hard, especially with his son, which is not actually a fault. When I first met my stepmom, now granted, I think I was like 19 or 20 years old, but my dad brought her around to meet me. Not something he did very often, so I knew it was serious. I knew he really liked this woman. She tried so hard. You know her, so you know exactly what
She was
I'm
still
talking
doing it
about.
until a couple years ago.
I mean, honestly, she still tries a little too hard.
Maybe even now, yeah.
But I have, from the beginning, found it a really endearing trait that she cared so much what we thought of her, that we were so important to her that she wanted to be a part of our family. So let's be easy on Victoria for being a little bit of an eager beaver here. And her laugh, it just makes Sam look like a jerk, that he would let something as silly and superficial as her having an annoying laugh. And if you like
Even
somebody...
the kid. Sam's not the kid.
Well, I guess that's true. Sam isn't really bothered by the laugh, is he? Then why does Sam give
Because the kid runs his love life.
Another annoying thing. I know you hate this stuff, and you know I hate this stuff. Precocious kids getting their way beyond anything reasonable. Not charming.
It helps if the son likes her. It is not a prerequisite, because you have to live your own life. And it's funny, too, that Sam pines this much. He wants a date. He wants sex, undoubtedly. That's part of this, too. One of the best scenes in the movie, actually, is between two guys. I know this is a woman's movie made by a woman. Meg Ryan, I think, has more screen time than Tom Hanks does. It might be equal, but I think she has a little bit more than he does. So, in a way, it's her movie. She definitely drives the story, obviously.
Yeah, she's the main
Sam's
actor
a very
in the
passive
story.
character.
Yeah.
But I think the best scene in the whole film is between Tom Hanks and Rob Reiner, who, as we've seen in many other films, and of course he started as an actor, is a great actor. We're going to cover Wolf of Wall Street, I think it's next month. He steals that movie from outstanding actors as DiCaprio's dad. I thought he was in the movie more than he is, but in the brief time he has, he's great with Hanks. They should have acted more in this movie or another one together. The whole butt-checking scene, that was mildly funny. How's my butt?
So Hanks pushed back on some of the aspects of his character to make him more manly. He thought in the first draft of the script that the character of Sam was just written like a woman. Initially, he was hesitant to spend a weekend with Victoria, and he was like, listen, this man has not had sex in a year and a half. He's going to move mountains just to be alone with this woman. Mm-hmm. And he made them change the script to have him be motivated strictly by sex, which makes his character less endearing to me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm the target audience for this film.
I didn't get the feeling that was what he was doing on that date, though.
He literally said at some point, not on the date, when they're going away for the weekend, but it gets kiboshed because Sam gets on a plane to New York. And the babysitter shows up, and he's supposed to go spend the night with Victoria somewhere. And he...
Wait, he introduced his girlfriend to his kid, and they haven't even had sex yet?
Yeah, that's implied.
Okay.
I don't know, it was the 90s. They're still being chased about it. He does introduce her to his son, I guess, a little too early.
We've often said that on podcasts about old movies. The reason why they get married in 3 days after they met is because they want to have sex. It's probably a code thing more than reality even then. I'm sure people swore and did all kinds of awful things. Like Babylon, the movie, is probably fairly accurate. But as a movie character, it had to be up and up. So you had to marry to have sex.
So there is a line when his son is trying to get him to go to New York, and he's like, I'm not canceling my trip with Victoria. I can't remember if he says it to his son or to somebody else. I haven't gotten laid in a year and a half. I'm not canceling this trip.
Maybe Nora Ephron just thought that would be a funny line.
Well, she thought a lot of things would be funny that are not.
And
People must find this movie funny.
She wrote one of the great, for you at least, I like it a lot too.
My favorite.
Certainly romantic comedies.
Yeah. When Harry Met Sally is one of my all-time favorite
movies, which Reiner directed.
Yes. I think she wrote that script from scratch, whereas this, she just made changes to somebody else. Yeah. Yeah. The script came in and it was originally a drama, and then she punched it up for comedy and changed it to make it lighter in general.
In theory, she punched it up for comedy.
Right. People must find it funny.
When Harry Met Sally is legit funny. I think I've seen it at least twice since we covered it at the end of the first year when we started this podcast, and I know you've probably seen it 8 times since then.
Billy Crystal's character is a way bigger jerk than Tom Hanks' character in this movie, and yet I am rooting for them as a couple so much. Yeah. I forgive him all of his transgressions and all the ways he is a womanizer in that film. I don't care. They're going to fall in love, and it's all going to work itself out. And Tom Hanks is not a womanizer at all in this movie. I'm not even trying to imply that. But there's something about the way he's making fun of his sister for liking Affair to Remember, which actually is the closest thing to a funny scene.
He and Victor Garber apparently improv that whole thing,
It is actually the closest thing to
And
comedy.
his sister is played by the woman. I don't know if they were actually married, but I thought they must have been. And I double-checked. Yes, he'd been married to Rita Wilson for a long time, and she plays his sister. The movie I just covered on Friday, Scarface, obsesses about his sister, and it's obviously very sexual undertones. Certainly the remake has this even more so. I didn't know that there'd be a connection between Scarface, either one of them, and Sleepless in Seattle, but at least in that one way there is. Okay, yes, Hanks' character doesn't want his sister, but she's played by the woman he's been sleeping with for, 8 years in real life. What a strange casting. It's not like it's, we got Rita to play this character, with respect. An okay actress at best. If you got some superstar that happened to be married to him and she does a cameo as his, well, whatever it is, slightly extended cameo as his sister, why cast her in that role? Such a strange thing. And also, it's the idiot plot. Although, I'll give this movie credit for one thing. Sam and Annie finally meeting at the very end of this rom-com where they never actually officially meet until the last few seconds of the movie. That's an unusual choice. I actually applaud that. But when they see each other multiple times, he sees her in the airport. And of course, as I said to you during the screening, Meg Ryan maybe never looked better than she does in this movie.
Yeah.
And I think she's better in this all the way through than she is at some points of When Harry Met Sally. You know, I hate the scene when she's weeping and the night that she and Billy Crystal finally do it. Although I think a lot of the time she's great in that movie. I hate that scene so much. I think she's terrible in that one scene. But he sees her at the airport and he's a little bit thunderstruck because she's so pretty. They see each other when he's hugging his sister, but then Annie thinks, oh God, he's got somebody now. So it's the idiot plot. It wasn't terribly done, but you could have a conversation. I was going to talk about the idiot plot thing. There it is right there.
Yeah, except it doesn't stop her.
It does in that moment because the movie can't be over yet.
Right. Yeah. Imagine you're just chilling, minding your business, and a woman across the street is staring at you. Then she crosses the street and is like, I think we should be together because I heard you on the radio.
She doesn't say anything in that scene,
No, she doesn't because he hugs his sister.
Right.
But imagine she did say something, how that
I see what you're
would
saying,
be
yes.
insane.
We always do what happens next in a movie, and we will in this one, of course, too, at the end of this. But what happens next in a scene, had it not been for the fact she thinks that the sister is his girlfriend, yeah, right. What does she say to him?
What does she say? That doesn't sound crazy. I flew across the country to stalk you from across the road.
And he's already had a problem with all the letters he's been getting that Jonah has been encouraging. He doesn't like the fact that these women are sending all these letters to him in the first place and that Jonah gave their address.
And he's right.
Yeah.
About, among other things, the fact that he shouldn't be answering letters from women who don't live in Seattle. She lives in Baltimore.
That scene is moderately funny when he points out on the map. And they do a lot of map visual effects in this as well with all the flying around, especially towards the end. But he pulls down a map that they have in their house, beautiful house, right on the water.
It's a houseboat. I read that it is actually a houseboat.
That's a houseboat? That's a big houseboat.
Pretty big houseboat.
What's he got to whine about? Look what he's got. So anyway, he pulls down the map and he shows, we're in Seattle. This is Baltimore she lives in?
Yeah.
And he shows how far away that is. Okay, here's a question for you. Do you know anybody who you think would be crazy enough to do what Andy does in this movie? We want to respect the fact that the guy's mourning his wife. And if you want to mourn your dead wife for 10 years, that's your business. I don't think I could ever mourn, sorry, even you for that long. Either kill yourself or move on.
Right. Come on, I'm right here. I can hear everything you're saying.
But, okay.
I give it 3 months time. Said I'm moving on, baby.
3. 2.5 weeks. But anyway, you know what I'm saying here. And my question for you is, do you know anybody who's this insane?
No, Annie is the type of woman who would marry a prison lifer. This fixation on somebody that you don't know, I don't think we knew this term or used this term in the 90s, but it's an intensely parasocial relationship. It's strictly one-sided. He doesn't even know she exists.
Right, he's
really.
a bit of a celebrity, and that's what usually that
she hears his voice on the radio. She's charmed because he's describing what made his late wife wonderful, which was all the ways when you really love someone. There were little idiosyncrasies that made them them. It wasn't really outstanding, but it was just because you love them, those things become special. And it is romantic. He's talking about another woman, lady. What is happening in your brain to put this together, to think that this is you? It's one of my killjoy traits that I have a really hard time skirting over dumb details in movies to just simply enjoy it and let it wash over me.
It's been less than 2 weeks since the end of Scoring at the Movies with Chris. He talked about in the finale episode about how he looks at movies and TV differently than he ever did before because he did a podcast for 5 years where he had to analyze the movie. This must be true for you, and I know it is for me, that you look at anything differently because we've been doing a podcast, you and I, for double that length, more than 10 years. So you say you can't really enjoy these kinds of things.
Well, I didn't like this movie when I saw it when it came out.
I didn't love it
I thought it was dumb then, too. And I didn't get why it was so popular. I also think that in some ways I've gained more patience for things that aren't my jam. I've kind of strengthened the muscle of learning to appreciate movies that really aren't up my alley. I love a good rom-com, something like When Harry Met Sally. You mentioned Groundhog Day, also came out in 93.
Yep.
One of my favorite movies, and so elegant and beautifully written and smart and funny and everything you want, and it has to be that good for me to like it. Mediocre rom-coms just drive me up the wall. In movies we hate, I think How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
That was mine.
We recently rewatched My Best Friend's Wedding. And
a couple years ago, I was just thinking that.
Absolutely eviscerated
That might be worse than this. It is worse than this.
It is a mean movie. At least this movie has kindness and empathy, whereas My Best Friend's Wedding is a movie about jerks.
The best thing about that movie is we could rip on it because we watched it at home. We could say whatever we wanted to. I would hate if that was a new movie and we saw it in the theater because I'd have to contain everything I wanted to say about it.
Yeah, we really had to watch it together.
And I've seen that before, and I did
it.
not dislike it as much as I did 2 3 years ago.
I think I liked it more when I was younger. And I think when I was younger, okay, so
We're more cynical.
being a grown-up makes you think differently about romance in a way that these things don't work on me the same. And there is this element of this movie that makes it popular, and I think there's a level of fantasy fulfillment. There's this twisted fantasy that love and romance are cosmic and instant. It implies that things like allergies or an annoying laugh are deal breakers. Falling into a routine that feels a little square and boring is actually a red flag, and you ought to hold out for this magical person who will never need a sleep apnea machine. You know, it's a familiar fantasy. I think it's way overused in, for lack of a better term, media meant for women. It is a fantasy that a lot of my girlfriends indulge in. And I think I probably indulged in when I was very young.
In what they
not in their
watch.
lives, but what they watch, the books they read. And it's part of this overall notion that all of our problems will be solved by a man. And if a man hasn't solved all of your problems, well, you're probably with the wrong man. And I think it's not just incorrect. It's a recipe for unhappiness, but there is something that's very appealing about this, and it's the easy and romantic solution on a silver platter for all the ways we feel unsatisfied with our lives. And it's a fantasy that writers in Hollywood and in novels, too, plenty of books commit this crime as well. They serve it up to us on a silver platter like pablum, and I think women eat it up. And then it sets us up for disappointment later. I think I was disabused of this notion fairly young in my life because I am a real skeptic. I was born that way. I can't help it. I am a total killjoy.
But just since you and I met each other, look how the world's changed for the worse. In 10 years, the world has gotten way worse and way more cynical. There's a lot of good things that have happened in the last 10 years. But the ones that I think stand out the most are the shitty things. At least in this part of the world. Well, I guess every part of the world.
Maybe I would be better off if I could escape the world and give into a fantasy like this once in a while.
But you bring your brain. You have to bring your brain.
Yeah. And this film is also kind of a Rorschach test for how people feel about fate and serendipity. And I never believed that there were cosmic forces out there drawing me to my one and only. I think...
Well, the internet did.
Because it brought you and I together?
Indirectly and then directly.
We did meet in person. And it's funny you say that because
but
the reason we met...
is because of internet dating with somebody else, for me.
That's true. But we were introduced because we have the same last name. This tremendous coincidence that is what brought us together. And had we not met that day, I don't think we would have reconnected on a dating site later. So it's funny as I say that there's a serendipity. But I'll say this too. You and I were both very actively dating, and we kissed a lot of frogs because I think we both knew that, what is this phrase? It's, there's a lid for every pot, no matter how crooked. I think we both knew that we were a little dented, and we wanted to hold out for the lid that fit our pot. I find that romantic, but I also think that it was work and commitment to dating and finding somebody. And then once we found each other, we can't sit here and pretend that someone waved a magic wand and made our lives perfect because we found our, quote, soulmate.
Yeah.
I don't believe in soulmates. I believe in our relationship. If you were to die, I feel like I could go on a radio show and tell everybody about how my favorite thing about you is that you would sometimes save a fart for when I hug you and then act like I squeezed it out of you. It truly makes me laugh every single time. I would probably remember these little details. And
Gasless in Toronto. Now I'm gasless. But wait, another one's coming soon. But I would hope and I would want you to move on if I was dead.
I'll stuff you and put you on the couch, babe.
2.5 weeks later. Stuff me right away. Start dating 2.5 weeks later.
Okay. Put it in the calendar.
You know one of the reasons why he does pine so much? Carrie Lowell plays her. We see a little bit in the beginning. We don't really see her much after that. So she got cancer and died. Carrie Lowell, Richard Gere's ex. I don't know if they were married at this point, but they got married at some point. Wow.
Oh, she's a real beauty.
Although Meg Ryan, like I said a few minutes ago, has probably never been prettier than she is in this film.
And I'm not saying that Tom Hanks is a slouch, but he's not a 10.
No.
I guess he's an architect, which in the 90s is the hottest job you could have as a
Look
man.
at The Office and the view he had in Chicago. And he wanted to change.
Successful architect.
And then look what they have in Seattle. Okay, that boat. I thought it was a house. Whatever they have that's right on the water. I'm not really a water person, not really a boat person. But I would live there, and maybe I'd learn to be a boat person if I lived there. But even where he worked in Chicago as a 12, as a view especially, this man has had a charmed life despite losing his wife and 18 months of pining. Well, let's get back to the Annie and Walter thing. They get engaged. They announce it at is it Thanksgiving or Christmas?
It's Christmas.
Right, yeah, because you said Christmas Eve. Because they drive separately, and she hears
I'm also
the radio
like,
show.
really? This radio show is going live on Christmas Eve night?
Right. Yeah, right.
Another thing movies do, people at Christmas Eve work right till dinner time.
Well, that's one of the things about Scrooge that made no sense either. Is
Or
that
Elf as well. That all these
right.
people had
Little
to do
kids
this
are watching a
meeting.
news program.
Everybody in their
Thanks,
souls to
Betty.
be
I love that
watching.
ending, but it's illogical. And in Scrooge, she's putting on a live
He's
show.
also like insisting on having this meeting. And it's a pitch.
It could wait 2 days.
It's a definition of something that can wait.
So they get engaged at her family's house. Well, they got engaged before, I guess, but they announced it to her family. We talk about the allergies. Bill Pullman, by the way, I guess people probably know, but he does play this nerdy sad sack.
He's not even a sad sack.
Well, they make it out to be that way.
Justice for Walter.
And then we see the dress that she would get married in if they got married. It's grandma's dress. It's pretty nice. It covers up too much of Meg Ryan or anybody. You would think there'd be a little bit of skin exposed in a
Pretty tight.
modern dress.
Well,
Yeah.
pretty tight because it's, I guess, too small for her, which makes me wonder, how small was her grandmother?
Yeah, right.
Because Meg Ryan is so petite. She's just so little.
She's always been. Yeah,
so for her to rip the dress and she's like, it's a bad omen.
Right, yeah. But you mentioned the radio show thing. It's Dr. Marcia who names Sam Sleepless in Seattle because he talks about being up all night. And then Annie cries to that and says, it was like, or no, actually he says, it was like magic, describing something that happened in their lives. If you can go with that, fine. We're back on this point again. Obviously for guys, generally speaking, it's the ones that could say, I could turn my brain off and watch that movie. I'm not saying I've never done that kind of thing, but generally speaking, I don't. Maybe because we're critics. It's been over 10 years we've been doing this. I was like this before, I think, though. I don't want to turn my brain off. I want the dumb movie, and we're covering one very soon, Armageddon, to make me care. And Armageddon really makes me care. It's one of the great things about that movie. It's one of the best things in that genre that anyone's ever done.
And that's another,
but this movie never made me care.
Yeah, that's another genre that I don't particularly like. An action movie has to be great
But you
for
like
me to
that
care
one.
about it. But I do love Armageddon. I hate Michael Bay, but I love Armageddon. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I'm going to get myself in the right headspace. What year did it come out?
98.
98. Okay, so I was 20 years old. It really worked on me back then. I really hope that I can just turn my brain off and enjoy it. Because like you say, you really care. And it has a lot of the same things that this movie has. You have charismatic stars. Okay, the script isn't funny, but I will say that it's tight. It has lots of bon mots here and there. It
wasn't boring.
It's entertaining. I never felt like the movie was dragging. It does say some things that are pathological. There's a point where Meg Ryan is like, is it crazy that I want to get on a plane and meet him in Seattle?
Yep.
Yeah, but then Rosie O'Donnell, who plays her best friend.
Who's also pretty good in this. She and Reiner are probably better than the two leads. Because the two leads are stranded, and those two are not.
And she says, what's crazy is how crazy it's not. I'm like, whose friend are you?
Yeah.
You are a terrible influence.
She's enabling
This
her.
woman's not making any sense. She's behaving erratically.
Also, she has a good job. They both have good jobs, so it's not a matter of...
That was back when being a journalist was a good job.
Oh, true, yeah. But it's not like she's got nothing and feels like, well, the one thing I can cling to now is the notion of love with this man I've never met before, even though I've been engaged to this other dude for, I don't know, a day or so, whatever it's been, a little while. But she has an awesome life, or she should at least. Anyway. Okay, what about An Affair to Remember? Have you ever seen that?
I've never seen it.
I did once a long time ago. I thought about covering it last year, because then it was 65 years, 65 years old, I guess. The original trivia for this, last week leading into it, was going to be about what movie is referred to by this one that has a similar type of plot. But I wrote that before we watched Sleepless in Seattle and realized they mention that movie over and over and over and over and over. They really rely on that so much.
The last time I had seen this movie was close to 30 years ago, and I would not have needed to see it again to remember that it was An Affair to Remember, even though Affair to Remember is a movie I've never seen, but I always associate it with Sleepless in Seattle for that reason.
Maybe as a dramatic rendition of this, it works a little better. But funny thing, too, about You've Got Mail is that's a remake of a movie I covered by myself late last year, right around Christmas time, The Shop Around the Corner, which was a solid film, but I didn't laugh that much. I think I prefer You've Got Mail of the two of them. I think I even said that in that podcast.
Which also has a scene where Meg Ryan breaks up with her boyfriend for no great
Greg
reason.
Kinnear
yes.
as well.
And he also takes it surprisingly well.
So two of Ephron's big movies of the 90s, certainly with these two lead actors, are remakes or referrals at least, maybe more referrals is a better example, to two classic romantic movies that made the Passions list. I think Shop Around the Corner did too. That's why I covered it, yeah, so it made that list. And are revered. It's funny that she'd go back to that well because she wrote what was an original screenplay, Woody Allen-esque, I guess, and it's not like When Harry Met Sally was revolutionary, but it's so much better in almost every way, and these adaptations are just blah.
Maybe it's the studio. They see a talented woman do something great, and they want to give her another shot because they want to make money, but they just can't bring themselves to just let her do whatever she wants. Women in Hollywood, even when they have a great success, studios still don't have the faith in them that they would have for a guy who did the same.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a case of the studio just giving her these projects. Well, it's a remake, so we have this safety net of trusting that there's something worthwhile there for her to start with, where she's better with her original ideas. In her career, her very lauded career, she was almost chiefly a writer more than she worked in Hollywood. She was more apt to write essays than she was to write fiction. She only ever wrote fiction once with Heartburn, which was the only novel she ever wrote, and it was very heavily autobiographical.
Not really that fictional then. It's based on her life.
No, really,
Mike
Carl
Nichols?
Bernstein.
That's what it was, right? Nichols directed the movie. That's
Is
what I'm
that right,
thinking.
Carl Bernstein?
I think you're right, yeah. She was with him.
Woodward and Bernstein, yeah.
And Nichols and the Streep are the two actors that play those two, and it's Nichols that directed it. That's what it is. Yeah, she did Julie and Julius. That's, of course, Julia Child. Bewitched, that was terrible. Hanging Up, I don't know if I saw that. That's Meg Ryan, though. Michael's okay. Mixed Nuts, This Is My Life, never saw that. My Blue Heaven, When Harry Met Sally, Cookie, Heartburn, Silkwood, that's a drama. Yeah. And then we're getting back to TV movie credits. So some of those are pretty good. Some of those are mediocre, but the best one by 1,000 miles is When Harry Met Sally.
They caught lightning in a bottle with that movie. There was a lot of things that went right.
Perfect casting, the right director, who was the absolute peak, being Reiner. So maybe she shouldn't have directed this material. Maybe Reiner would have made it better. I hate to say that. Our women listeners may be saying, how dare you? But so the comparisons with An Affair to Remember does have the Empire State Building as a plot point. I think they go there, or at least Cary Grant goes there at one point, and then Deborah Carr's not there. Well, in this case, the kid goes there, and Annie's not there until she is at the very end. Did that work for you at all?
It sure didn't.
Okay.
The challenge for most rom-coms is that we need a believable reason for two lovers to be kept apart. And the challenge in Sleepless in Seattle is that I needed a believable reason for these two to get together. Because I felt nothing for them as a couple. How can they have chemistry? They're never in a room together.
Or even speaking on a phone or something like that.
And Sam's barely aware that she exists.
Right. The kid is.
Yeah, but so what?
Yeah.
Your 10-year-old kid sifts through a few hundred letters and picks this girl I can't remember. She says something about...
For that many people to
sports.
write him, yes,
Yeah.
they click that way with the Cubs or the Yankees or whatever it is. But for that many people to have written Sam and Jonah to read the letters, there had to be a few in there that also would have come across pretty well. How is she the only one that he really seems to care about, to the point where he, as an 8-year-old, flies to New York on his own, which they point out in the goof section. If Sam had just called the airline, he didn't have to fly there himself, except you need your ending. But Sam could have just called them and say, you can't let my kid go off on his own. And they probably would have known that anyway. I think you can do that. Kids can fly, or at least they could. Maybe with 9/11 they
unaccompanied
can't.
minors.
Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
certainly could fly alone. But then somebody's got to meet you on the other end. They don't just say, okay, bye, go enjoy New York City in the winter.
Have fun, kid.
And then it is done fine, but we've seen it in so many other movies, so it is a cliche, where the only reason why Sam and Annie do actually meet is because the kid leaves his bag behind. Jonah forgot the bag, they got to go back for it, but when they first started going down the elevator, bing, there's Annie, but nobody's on the observation deck. Bing, where's your bag, where'd you leave it? And then they meet. If you're already into this movie, that would be fine for you. For me, it's, oh, come on, you're going to that level now, too, where you barely miss each other in the elevators, and only because the kid's forgetful about something, the only thing he brought with him to New York City, he happened to forget it.
Maybe I just need to accept that this is a genre, a conceit. It's just never going to work on me. Much like I'm never going to watch an entire Fast and the Furious movie. They're just not for me. I'm never mad at people who enjoy things that aren't my jam. I actually have pretty unusual taste, I think, compared to most people in films.
Especially women.
I guess so. Although most women I like, you know what their favorite movies are? Star Wars and stuff.
Really?
Yeah, totally. I can't think of one person I know who loves Sleepless in Seattle. I'm going to have to do a poll and just find out what the appeal is. Anyway, I would genuinely love for somebody to make the case for what makes it great. All the momentum from this movie comes strictly from the poster. You see the poster and you're like,
Good
here
poster.
are two people I love, two actors who I have loved in other movies. I can't wait to see them get together. And you have to take that into the movie to feel any motivation for them to fall in love. And if that isn't there for you, or it's just not strong enough, then the rest of the movie doesn't make any sense. It is strictly their star power and the way that we are conditioned to expect that from all Hollywood romances.
You know what's funny, too, is that Meg Ryan was big because of When Harry Met Sally and some other things she had done. Hanks had been big in the 80s with Big and Splash and the TV show and so on, but then was not doing so well in the early 90s, even the late 80s, after Big. But then he does A League of Their Own with Penny Marshall and all those great women actors. I love that movie. Big fan of that one. We covered that many years ago. And there's that, not romance, but they do feel like they could be romantic in Hanks and Gina Davis. But who's she married to in that movie? Bill Pullman.
Oh my God.
And the reason that they don't end up together is at least that. She's so loyal to him. When she thinks that he's died in the war, some other player's husband did, she's weeping in a room that night of the possibility that Bob, I think is his name, could have died. And the brief time they have on screen together, Pullman and Davis are pretty good, and Pullman and Hanks meet. So Hanks had all that goodwill from that movie, I think, and people liked him from before. He hadn't had a good spell, but they did like him. Philadelphia was later that year. I think that was a winter movie. This is a summer movie. We didn't know that Forrest Gump and Apollo 13 and Toy Story and all the rest were coming, but he was getting to be at the top of his game again,
and he
too.
was trying to move into dramatic films. It was part of the reason why he picked Sleepless in Seattle. Even though it was a rom-com, it was a more grown-up film, and he was trying to move into that.
So Pullman's 15 seconds, and not more than that, in A League of Their Own, is way more effective than anything in this. I've never been his biggest fan. I think I've said that every time we've covered one of his movies. And it's been a very interesting group of films. I didn't even include A League of Their Own in my little notes here, but Spaceballs, Independence Day, Lost Highway. The best thing of all those movies that he's pretty good in Lost Highway, actually. But it might be that small performance in A League of Their Own.
I'm going to disagree because I was just thinking that maybe part of the reason I get so defensive about poor Walter is because I was literally raised on Spaceballs. So I'm not proud to say that that is probably the movie I have seen more times than any other movie. And at some point in my childhood, I could recite every single word of it. And whether he was good or not, my 12-year-old brain didn't care. I thought he was great. And then one of the movies on the short list of rom-coms that I do love is While You Were Sleeping, in which he is the romantic hero.
Yep.
So it's funny, we talk about how star power is the only thing that's driving the audience to root for these two people to get together. But in my mind, not that I don't love Tom Hanks, but I see Bill Pullman as just as much of a romantic lead as Tom Hanks. His allergies, although even as I say this, there is a part of me that's grateful that Nora Ephron didn't make him a total son of a bitch. A lot of movies, some lazy writing, like, say, Wedding Crashers. I don't know if you remember Bradley Cooper, before he was a huge star, played the romantic foil who's already engaged to Rachel McAdams, but Owen Wilson is falling in love with her, and he's the nice guy, and Bradley Cooper proves himself to be evil. Like
Sack. His first name is Sack.
Yeah, he's such a bad, mean person in that movie that you're like, how did she ever fall in love with him? Like, what is the appeal of this man? He's so clearly a bad person. So that's some lazy writing. You need somebody to keep our people apart.
They worked harder on that to make him a jerk, because they did work hard to make him a jerk in multiple ways, including talking to a friend on the phone about wanting to cheat or something, I think. He was going to bang somebody else, even though he's with Rachel McAdams, and I think engaged to her. Then Ephron makes Walter be a loser in this, or feel like he's a loser in this. She doesn't work that hard at it. It's just shorthand. If you like the movie, it's going to work for you, but we don't like the movie, so it doesn't work for us.
Yeah.
And of course, Hank says to Meg at the end, "Shall we?" as he takes her hand, and the movie does end.
We know they fall in love because the credits roll.
The movie's told us, yeah. So we've talked so much about Hanks today. Well, we've talked about him a lot over the years. 9 previous films. I think Defoe was another 9 or 10, so maybe Hanks just passes him with this. Anyway, they're right in the same
I bet
level.
He was the lead in those films a lot more often than Defoe was.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah.
Almost always. Splash, Big, A League of Their Own, Forrest Gump, Apollo 13, Toy Story, Saving Private Ryan, Castaway, and Captain Phillips, which we covered for a Now Playing Project podcast back in 2013. Meg Ryan, though, the only time we've ever covered it before was When Harry Met Sally. I just talked about Pullman's credits. Barbara Garrick does play Victoria. I don't know who she was, but she was in Far From Heaven, which we covered last year. Rosie O'Donnell was in A League of Their Own with Tom Hanks and Bill Pullman. She has a lot of scenes with Hanks, of course, but not with Bill Pullman. Ross, I guess Mallinger, spelled the same way as Salinger, as in J.D. Salinger, but with an M. He's one of the kids in Kindergarten Cop and did a lot of TV. I wouldn't say he's bad in the film, but his character is maddening, and you want to slug him. Rita Wilson, playing Hanks' sister, was also the waitress in That Thing You Do, which you finally saw only recently, and you did like it, right?
Yeah, I loved it.
And I love
Great
that.
movie.
It's one of my favorite movies. That's Hanks' first movie ever as a director, and I think his first ever screenplay, too. And I've seen it so many times. Steve Zahn, hilarious. And she's pretty good in that one small scene she has in that film. Victor Garber's in this briefly. We've covered him before. Titanic, Legally Blonde, and Argo. And now this. What a varied, weird foursome, I should say. David Hyde Pierce, you said during the screening, great casting for Meg Ryan's brother. They look certainly enough alike. We covered The Fisher King a couple years ago. He's in that. And, of course, Frasier was going to break out around that time. I think it was a year or so
Just a couple
later.
months later.
Would have been 93, right. I think
Yeah.
Frasier was the year after Cheers wrapped. So, yeah, it must have been that fall. And then Gabby Hoffman, who has a few scenes as Jonah's friend, was in Field of Dreams and also was on Girls as a grown-up. Pretty effectively, too.
Yeah, she's grown into the most wonderfully weird actor. It's great.
Ephron, we've talked about her credits, I think, already. She wrote with, I think, rewriting in her case more so, but that counts as writing. David S. Ward, who wrote The Sting, and also, I think, the Major League movies. Chris and I covered those on Scoring at the Movies years ago. But it's Jeff Arch's story, so I guess he came up with the concept in the first place. It was his first ever screenplay, and he only wrote 3 in total. The producer, Gary Foster, also produced Tin Cup, which Chris and I covered years ago on the defunct Scoring at the Movies. And he worked on Community, too, so he knows something about comedy. This is supposed to be funny. Tin Cup and Community are funny. And then Delia Ephron, of course, Nora's sister, was an associate producer on this picture. The movie's 185-1. We got the DVD from the Toronto Public Library. Cinematographer, Sven Nykvist. The guy who worked with Bergman all those years, Persona and Cries and Whispers, won 2 Oscars. I think for those 2 films. Certainly for Cries and Whispers it was an Oscar. And also for Woody Allen before this, I believe. I think it was in the 80s he worked with Woody Allen. And then Nora Ephron on this movie. It looks pretty good. But it wasn't a typical Sven Nykvist movie like he did with Bergman.
It looks lovely, but it is a boilerplate rom-com.
The editor, I don't know if it's Robert Reitano, I don't know how you say it, but Reitano. He cut many movies, but was a sound editor on Serpico, which we covered a few weeks ago. And Mark Shaman, who was nominated for the song, we covered him on Misery. Reiner directed that. A Few Good Men. Reiner directed that. I covered that by myself last year. South Park wrote that song, Blame Canada, that was nominated for Oscar. And, of course, I think he did the music for that. And then Hairspray, which I cannot stop watching as far as clips go. At the end, the You've Got the Beat sequence.
Just, how does it go? You
can't stop the beat, yeah. And I think I just said the name wrong in the movie, or the song, but you can't stop the motion of the ocean, of the sun and the sky. So you just said you don't love the look, although it's Nykvist, it's fine. But
the look is fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about the cutting the music? And we've talked about the screenplay, I guess, already.
Technically, it's a great film. We're really dumping all over it, but it does deserve praise for being very entertaining. It moves at a clip. You never get bored. There's a great forward momentum, which must have been challenging considering how unconventional the story is. Yeah. There is a real elegance to the storytelling in the movie. Credit where credit is due.
I love the idea of they don't meet until the end. in a love story. That is so unusual.
I
The
commend
concept
their
is great.
bravery, way to do something new, to shake it up. And maybe there's a film out there where it would work for me. There are movies where this has worked for me before. A movie I saw when I was a kid from the 80s, there's a couple in love in heaven, and he makes a bargain with God that he has to be born at the same time as her to find her.
I think I saw that.
Literally, do you remember the name of it? I was thinking about it
Made
so
in
much.
Heaven?
Maybe that's it. And they spend their whole lives, they don't know about each other because they've been reincarnated or whatever. And then at the very end of the movie, they just pass each other on the street and they immediately know that they're soulmates. I buy it in that movie, and I love that ending.
But have
It
you seen
totally
that
works for me.
since as an adult?
No. But it also introduces this aspect of, I know it's not magic, but it is like magic. There's actual kismet in that. There's a heaven, there's a God. There are people pulling the strings. We know they belong together because they have told us they belong together, where there's no element of magic or kismet, any serendipity in Sleepless in Seattle.
Just obsessed stalking.
Just obsessed stalking. Serendipity, there's a movie where they don't really get together till the end.
Not
but
a big fan.
I've never seen it, but you introduce narratively the idea that the universe actually does want these two people to be together. Not the case in this movie.
Yeah, okay. What happens next? They discover they're not perfect for each other after they spend more than 14 seconds together.
What if she has an annoying laugh? What if he sneezes?
Even once. Not this again. Even if things do work out, which sad sack on the radio will she fall for next?
Yeah, maybe this is actually the runaway bride, and this is just the first engagement that she's walked out on.
All right, then, last thoughts on the movie we just trashed. Sleepless in Seattle.
If you love this movie, I am so sorry.
I don't apologize.
But also, honestly, tell me why. Do you find it funny? Do you root for these characters as a couple? Do you not crave justice for Walter? That's all.
That's good. I can't believe how beloved this movie is. I don't remember being a fan of it before, but I really hated it this time. The actors do the best they can, and Meg Ryan was never more dreamy, but Nora Ephron's script, and I guess those other guys, sinks them. The When Harry Met Sally script isn't flawless, but it's a masterpiece compared to this. Okay, that was a slander job on Sleepless in Seattle. In 7 days, we'll post the final episode in June that we'll do together. I've got a solo show on June 30th, so it's not the last show of the entire month. And we'll be tackling one of Robert Altman's greatest works. It even came out the same year as Sleepless in Seattle, Shortcuts, which we watched last night. So Bev knows the answer to this question. Maybe everyone else does too, but I couldn't think of anything better. And even after watching it, I couldn't think of a better question. So here we go. The coming attractions trivia question for Shortcuts. Major spoiler alert for this, though, if you haven't seen the movie yet. So here we go. Spoiler. Tim Robbins was a killer in The Player, Robert Altman film, which came out the year before Shortcuts. Who turns out to be a killer in Shortcuts? Is it Robbins again or somebody else?
So for the answer to that question, check out next week's podcast about Shortcuts. You obviously already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen, where you can also find our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. We're both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51, or you can reach us by email. Have you ever seen podcast@gmail.com? We're also on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada and the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
The movie we just talked about is the home of Starbucks coffee. This is better.
Oh, yeah.
Sparkplug's better. Well, at the end, Tom just say to Meg, shall we? So I'm saying to you now, shall we end this nightmare?
And cut.